on to item 3.0. Any additional items that we need to add? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4.0, approval of the minutes. Just need a motion to approve the minutes from our October 13th meeting.
So moved.
Motion made. Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. With that, the minutes are approved. Item 5.0, restriction and probation and removal. We just need to approve that 5.1, the probation action list. We do need a motion to do that. That's in your packet. I'm sure you all have reviewed it. Motion, Travis makes a motion to approve that list. Second made by Mr. Steiner. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? With that, 5.0 is that restriction and probation list is approved. On to item 6.0, Commissioner report.
Real quick, sent out a proactive communication to the membership upon request from the ENAC and a few other schools that were having a hard time scheduling with the league approvals from the clock. And knowing that bylaw 610.1, CHSAA would put the clock committee in a position to replace some of those schools, try to get in front of it and say, don't wait until April, don't wait until February 22nd. So there's some positive communication out there. We have 2 leagues that are willing to take potentially all 4 schools from the ENAC, and then I received some correspondence that a couple of our schools have requested to go into a different league, and they have been approved. So I'm waiting on that paperwork. So just getting in front of it. I don't know, Gabe, if you today the district athletic directors are going to meet from the 3 different from Aurora Public Schools, from Westminster, along with Karen Heigl from Denver Public Schools, to determine what that's going to look like, and then the ENAC will be dissolved per the bylaw, and then they will make that request. But Gabe and Casey read through the bylaws, which basically said you need to be declined to go into the different leagues before the clock replaces you. So they reached out to multiple leagues. I feel very confident after talking with Karen Michael last night that this is the best direction for ENAC, but it will be dissolved. Do you want to add anything to that, Gabe?
No, I think in the other part is all 4 ADs were in total agreement with everything, and everybody was in the process throughout, and then kind of Casey came in to wrap it all up, but it was kind of a unanimous thing, because you get into scheduling and the frustrations, and it just wasn't feasible, and it wasn't going to end good for any of us, and so we went down from the frustration path that we got to do something, and it just so happened that DPS unfortunately had some inclines in some of their schools in enrollment, decline in others, and they were at a position where they have a very split league from 3A to 5A, soon to be 6A, and adding 4 pieces to that puzzle was a perfect fit. Karen came up with a good idea, John Andrew came up with a good idea, so we kind of followed their lead after we put it out there. And so, publicly, I'd like to thank Karen and John for all their hard work, and Casey, and just making this happen. Rhonda, she heard a lot of my crying and complaining, but in the end, we do think it's what's best for our kids and for our metro schools as well.
So, thinking about that's happening all over the place. I mean, Black Forest, we're going to be 1A through 3A. Tri-Peaks is 2A through 4A. Leagues are becoming unimportant nowadays. Now, it worked out this time. What happens next cycle when we have a school that wants to change a league, or maybe a new school that comes in, or for whatever reason, a school wants into a league and there's no place for them, and it comes down
order to force a placement. So when you say that's happening in Black Forest, how many schools are in the Black Forest? So you're able to schedule. They only have 4 schools in their league, so that it is not happening across the state. I hear what you're saying.
We don't schedule 1As against 3As, right? It's not where
Choice.
everybody in the league schedules everybody.
I think if they even had a multi-class league with multiple schools, they would have scheduled anyone at that point, but their kids don't even get a varsity schedule without playing the same schools in your league 4 or 5 times, right, to get 23 games or 15. Yeah.
But I get that, and like, you know, Dayton, Thomas McLaren, and Fountain Valley are 3A schools in basketball, right? So, who do they schedule? Even if they schedule each other twice, that's 6 games, and they're still trying to go on 5 games. But, you know, that's a situation that's happening all over the place. I don't necessarily need to debate that, but the question is with clock placements, like when Valor was searching for a league, and nobody wanted it. It came down to a clock committee decision to place them in a league.
Yes.
And with one meeting now in April, is that process going to stand up if that situation occurs again?
That's why there was clear communication to alert our schools that we had some schools hanging out there, and that if we could embrace them as a membership and bring them on. So DPS, basically, if they agree today, right, that they will take them per the process, they can start doing their scheduling. So it's really just a matter of formality, that it gets approved by the clock committee on the 22nd, and then that it's done in April, but they will have their schedules done. Totally different situation with Valor. I mean, in terms of them applying for schools and everybody saying no, 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 and then the clock having to place them, right? This was about scheduling and potentially the inequities. And I want to go back to just one other thing that Gabe brought to our attention as a board about how the process, they were blindsided. They didn't even have enough time to go and find additional leagues to join once they found out that there were some schools that were leaving. So this is kind of a unique situation. Thankfully, that this maybe happened with some other schools, that there is a process in place, and they're following that, and we'll be able to not have to place them as clock, because our membership has embraced these schools that have some serious scheduling problem and potentially some equity problems for competitive and game scheduling.
So where is that process?
The process of
Getting these leagues together and talking before it comes to a clock committee having to replace somebody.
that was my email, basically saying, hey, if you guys.
But when I look at our bylaws and, you know, whether clock committee, do we have it, are we gonna follow, what process are we gonna follow in the future? Is what I'm asking, if this comes up again. Do we have anything written down? Do we have any bylaw that says this is what we're gonna do next time? Instead of just kind of getting together, and it worked out, and I'm glad it did, but I'm thinking.
They are following the bylaw. They have to apply to the leagues, and once they get turned down by the leagues, that is in our bylaws, that if that disbands at that time and they've been turned down, then they will be placed by clock. But what I like what you're saying and what the conversation is that we need to do a better job of the timeline of when a school or a league or a school is going to leave a league, that timeline and that notification to the members of any league is in place so that they have an opportunity to seek another home. Right now, our bylaws didn't have a timeline. It's like they found out, and then you had 4 days to go try to find the league, and everybody's like, no, we haven't even had a chance to discuss this. I extended the league timeline last year, so I think that we need to, as a clock committee during this even year, when we're not trying to play schools, really look at the process and outline a deadline for when you notify your league that you're leaving, and there's a timeline in between that. And then Ernie and I talked about potentially having, on the odd year or even year, having a second legislative council meeting only to approve those appeals and potentially go through all the committee reports, and then that way they can begin scheduling, and it is official, and they don't have to wait until April. So I hope that answers your question, like, we're in front of maybe some checkpoints that will help this process better for the next time. Sure, go ahead, Bethany.
So I just wanted to jump in on this too, because I just want to remind Dawn of the reason why we're in this agreement, and it's 610.3, and it's because our bylaws do allow placement of leaves, the February, the clock prior to the, so it says, the school chief leave membership shall apply to the clock prior to, and we're talking a year prior to the effective date, so it says in our bylaws technically that it can happen, and that's why we are allowing it to happen. But on that same note, it would be helpful to have more clarity or to not allow it in the future, and that's why it's also going to the camera.
Yes. And Bethany, I would also say that it did go through the process, we did allow it, and I mean, everybody's not privy to all the conversations, but it went back with the ENAC and myself, how many teams can we have in the league? How can we do X, Y, Z? So it was approved that ENAC would stay, as a unit, right? And then when they started scheduling, and then they saw how many leagues would not schedule them for non-league games, I guess you would say, non-league games, that's when we found out it was an issue this year. And that's when they said we would rather disband and go into another league than to try to make this schedule work.
Right, and technically by our bylaws, they're allowed to do that. So
Absolutely.
following the bylaws.
In terms of the process, I do think there's, and I don't know if it needs to be reconstructed in the bylaws. I don't know if it's professional equity or ethics or where, but it's pretty frustrating because last year we were denied in 3 leagues, and then we have to we have to submit another denial, and I'm getting denials again, just so that we could satisfy that, at least that portion of the bylaw. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. They already told us no. They already didn't invite us. The other league already told us no. They did it again. And so then so it was a last ditch effort. I think when you look at it at minimum, at least in terms of our specific processes, like Westy and then the other EMAC schools, it's frustrating at best. When you go down the trail of the optics and who our subpopulation kids are, yeah, we're gonna go equity really quickly. So that wide variety of spectrum, when you start looking at the process, I think when we start talking competitive equity, right, going down those whole processes, I think there's other variables that have to come into play. I don't know how you do that, right? I don't know how you do a multi-league classification and then you look at those variables, but I do think there's gotta be some timeline given way ahead of time, a lot of runway, so that we can work through those.
And he was frustrated because there were rural schools, there were others questioning the process, and I said, just because they told you no, that was in the last cycle for a different part of an odd year. You do have to receive a denial if the clock committee is gonna look to place you. So did they have to duplicate efforts? Absolutely, but we needed to be able to answer that we followed the bylaw process. We didn't use old data to place a school. So, I'm not gonna keep going on this. I think we said that there is a process in place. We think that we can put that second legislative council in so that there is, it's not gonna be a full-blown legislative council. We look at appeals and we go through the committee reports and then we move forward so that we're not overturning committee reports or anything like that until April. This is really to allow our schools to schedule in a timely manner if there is a lead change per the bylaws.
So I'm just gonna focus on something you just said, which I think was what Don was kind of asking. But you say that we're proposing a second legislative council, or you're going to propose it?
Our league that's one of the things that we're gonna talk about in our report, so.
Okay, so I'll wait for Ernie to talk about it, and we can move on.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Good, so thank you to the EMAC and everybody else. Second thing is, I'm gonna skip this for now and come back to 2 things, what we really need to talk about what your philosophy is around selecting sites for state. If the health mandates continue to be, more restrictive than what some of you in your communities feel comfortable with. Sunday, the governor came out with his first state mandate about 500 unseated in a venue that you must show proof of vaccination. We don't know where this is going to go by the time. I think Adam can give you a little bit of, update on Ball Arena and what they think will still be in place in March. And we need to know where you stand, because, mask mandates, we haven't had a lot of pushback. We start asking for mandatory vaccination cards or potentially testing. What does that mean for the public relations and everything else that we're trying to do around athletics? So we'd like to get our board's input on that. But before that, I'm just gonna give you a couple of reminders. Don't forget your board replacements for those of you that will be leaving, that you're following the protocols. I sent that to you in some bullet points about what your steps are. One of you you've given me a verbal confirmation, but we need your written confirmation that you've gone to every superintendent in your league, and then you're forwarding your, replacement in writing, so that I have that, if that's a question. All right, and then number 2 is our board of director meeting on 12/15 will be virtual, and it will be for you to give your final approval on any, proposals that will go forward through to the legislative council. I will go over those a little bit today, not in depth, but just to give you an idea of some of the things that will go to the handbook. But just so you know, that will be planned on the, virtual meeting on 12/15. We'll do a financial report, and we will also look at any kids that need, or schools that need to come off probation or restriction. So put that on your calendar. I'm thinking probably a 9:30 or 10 o'clock meeting. All right. So back to bullet point, championship sites. Your thoughts? Because if we get out there, we need your support.
This is strictly based on health mandates, correct? This discussion?
This is strictly based on if Adam starts to negotiate for Ball Arena, Jen starts to negotiate for a facility for Spirit or ice hockey, and we come back and the site directors say, in order to have wrestling in this building, everybody who walks in that door must be vaccinated or show proof of COVID negative tests within the last 48 or 72 hours.
That's the one that you just mentioned with wrestling is the one that I have the most concern with because it involves the most number of schools involved in culminating event that we have that's indoors.
Yes.
And so, you know, we're touching every single portion of the state. And, you know, as a diverse state, we've got pretty big disparity in personal beliefs and political views. And those obviously inform opinions on, as you mentioned, on either masks, and certainly around any documentation of either a negative test or a vaccination status. And obviously that's a place right now where throughout our nation, people are struggling with that. So my question around that, since that's the big concern, typically we have approved sites months ahead of time. How quickly are we gonna pivot if something comes up or something doesn't change? That, I guess that's my question.
That's why we're talking today, because if we go into those negotiations and Adam does what he needs to do, Jen with her corporate sponsors, and we're in Ball Arena, right now, we know that everything doesn't look like, Adam, I'll bring you in here in just a second. It doesn't look like it's gonna change, so if you want wrestling in the format with the 10 mats, and how we've done it in the past, it can only be done at one facility, and they've already told us that they will have those mandates, but I'm gonna turn it over to Adam.
Adam, one question I have for you on that is, do you know any, I mean, right now, obviously, they're doing it for the NHL and for the NBA, and they're selling out those arenas. How long is it taking them to get people through?
Don't know, my last communication with them was the day that they were setting up their tents to be able to embark on this endeavor. So I haven't been in contact with them since they've begun doing it. I haven't seen I'm not the social media butterfly by any stretch, but I haven't seen anything anywhere of a lot of negative comments about it. I think most have just kind of accepted it, and if you want to go, this is the secondary cost of entrance is to go through that procedure. As far as how much it slowed things down, I'm not sure. And for us, it would be a unique situation because we don't just do a single entry for wrestling. It's 5 different entries. So it is, and we typically, and with the adjusted schedule we've built so far, those are pretty quick turnarounds because as we all know, it's not the cheapest venue in the world. And so anytime that we have downtime, we're losing money. So we've got to turn it over quickly to get that next session in. So I would have concerns just in general about how quickly we could do a turnaround and get one crowd out and one crowd in. Because are they gonna, I assume they're just gonna let them go through those tents and then stage them, and that's your staging area, and then they can finally actually come through the metal detectors and everything else and go to their seats. And what that process looks like, I'm not sure. I mean, obviously they're doing it. I just don't know that they're doing it as quick a turnaround as what we are, because when they're opening the doors up 2 hours, 2.5 hours before an event, we generally open up 60 minutes before so that we can get one session over and get the next session in. I'm not sure what that transition would look like. I mean, obviously I'll work with them and figure that piece out if that's what we decide. But that is a concern.
They're doing the same thing that is talking about. I just talked to my theater director yesterday, so the event, I don't know if you know about Q10 events.
Which one?
Or it's at the downtown Denver every year, theater, and that's not. Yeah, well, it's not I don't think it's at the convention center, but it's in that area. And she gave me the pen because they were doing the exact same thing. My question to her was, on the negative test, like, we utilize the Vinex test kit, but my understanding is the Vinex test kit isn't throwing up the formal negative results. Format is throwing up the forward.
Not to prove, yeah.
Not to prove it, so
And
that does a substantial part of it.
And
We talk about this as a staff. It's great if you wanna go to Ball Arena and I wanna go see Coldplay, that's my choice, but we would be involved in saying, you don't get to see your grandkid or your son wrestle. It's not like that's a choice opportunity, so that's why I wanna just throw out all of these things. It's easy to say that, but we are tied to the school, we are tied to these opportunities and events, and then it will be the perception that we said in order to see your grandkid or your daughter participate, you must do this.
So in order to
It's
not have,
up to kids then too, because I assume participants would have to follow it.
Yes.
So we're also dictating to kids, you either have to be vaccinated, and
The
again, that's important.
participants have to be vaccinated, correct? Yeah.
And, you know, we've had plenty of discussions about not, you know, trying to keep privacy of students' choices private. So now you're talking through, oh, here's a line for those that have the vaccine, go show your card, and if you got test, then you guys come over here and say, well, there goes all of that. And with wrestling, in particular, it's over 3 days. So really, everybody has to get tested the day before, I would assume, or you gotta find a way to get tested, because it's 72 hours, right? So you either gotta get tested the day before, or you're gonna have to get a test, you know, I get a test Wednesday, okay, I can go Thursday and Friday, but now I gotta get retested to go Saturday.
Is that the way it reads, Adam, or is it just before the beginning of the event?
It just says 72 hours before entry. Of any day.
and
so.
That would be
and I'll
awesome.
Right.
That's your assumption.
So this isn't gonna change in Ball Arena, right? It's not changing in.
No, my conversations with Ball Arena is they don't, well, so first off, this was something that they elected to do. And it was a business decision on their part because they believed this was the best way for them to stay at 100% capacity as the COVID numbers increased. So this was a business decision on their part to keep capacity at 100%. So it is technically their rule for now. And so the way their rule is written is that anybody that enters must have a test within 72 hours of entry into the facility. That's for all individuals entering the building, coaches, spectators, individuals participating,
But an
your
example
cast,
of not,
assistant commissioner, all of us. have
an
to-
example of not having that rule would be like World Arena in Colorado Springs where I just was for volleyball last week. There's no rule and they're at 100% capacity and nobody's wearing masks.
Okay.
right?
That's correct.
That's correct. So,
Spectators and coaches would also have to be masked in the ball arena,
Correct.
and non-active participants.
Correct. You can take your mask off when you're going to the floor. When you're going to your actual basically we would do like we did last year where you would check your mask at the table. The policies we built on the fly last year, we do the same thing if we were at Ball Arena where you'll leave your mask at the table once you check in.
You know, and I remember your speculation about, you know, that they haven't really run into problems now, but I would venture to say that that's because it's largely people within the metro area who are attending those games. And I would think that
Probably a safe
for
assumption.
many of our schools, there's gonna be pushback.
is there any indication that any of these other venues that we've been using are going to change their rules as COVID numbers go up or down? Is there any
So that's what I was
indication?
gonna pose to you guys as a philosophy where we're at, because it could happen. We can get the week into state and they come back and say something.
Mhm.
It happened the rest of last year, with mandated testing.
Week before,
The week-
we got
There you
that.
go.
And that's where I see, so I think you're gonna see two different things. So what Ball Arena has is their own individual stance that they've taken to maximize occupancy. The First Bank Center is another facility that they run up in Broomfield. They've got the same policy in place there now. So those two facilities are doing that because they've elected to do that as an organization. The others have not made that decision as an organization. But we all saw what came out Sunday and over the weekend with anything 500 plus, as long as you're standing, you have to have the test or the vaccine. At some point, we're gonna realize that maybe COVID is spread while you're sitting also, and so my assumption is that will end up being a statewide mandate potentially. So right now, our decision is based on a facility that is chosen to do this on their own, but we may have those same mandates come out from the state level.
If we have the choice, I think again, and maybe this is just me, I think it's not a great idea to choose a place like Ball Arena if we have advance notice. Because the other piece with this is, yeah, every participant either has to have vaccine or they've gotta get tested with 72 hours. A kid that pops positive now is out of the tournament. And so we have now,
And his teammates.
well, depending on the district,
Possible.
depending on the district. So now, because of our choice to go there, that athlete cannot participate. If there are other places available, I think we need, and Adam, I know what kind of bind it puts you and really the other commissioners in. But if we know this is staring us in the face, I don't know that we can pursue that. I just think that puts us in a bad position, and like Ernie said, we're touching every part of the state now. And we all know that the different regions have different views on what's going on.
I don't think
So-
it's just
so-
your athlete that's gonna test positive. It's gonna wipe out the whole team based on that one positive. That's what we have to research. We go back to the positive test day, they're gonna look back 3 days ahead. Oh, they were with the wrestling team in the wrestling room. Wipe out that whole group.
Well, certainly,
So-
there's not.
So, Travis, I'm gonna play devil's advocate and understand when I'm doing this, I'm not stating that this is my personal opinion or something that I agree
I
with.
can't believe Ernie's gonna play devil's advocate.
Oh, man.
Likewise, if we go to, if we decide that we're gonna move an event like this to a county that is more open, are we not telling those counties who believe that we should be masked and should be following mandates? That now that we're submitting them to something that they don't believe in?
They still have choice. I guess that's the
How is it
difference I see.
It's not.
How's it a different choice
They-
though?
They
It's
still
not
get to
different.
choose whether they want to go get vaccinated or not. They get to choose if they would like to wear a mask into that facility or not. That's the difference that I see.
Same thing with Ball Arena though. Schools still have choice. You can either participate by following these guidelines or not participate because you don't believe in those guidelines. Whereas the other way, we're exposing you would be the statement that would be made to people who have not followed the guidelines that we believe in.
Yeah, in both scenarios, people are, they still have a choice, just in both scenarios, some people don't like the choice given. And so like, that's what it comes down to. So I would take the stance that like, we need to pick the best venue for the event that we want to host, because reality is like World Arena, can it fit 10 mats? Can we host, like
They
if
can
we?
fit the mats, can't fit people.
So like, let's say we could, for instance though, but then it comes down the, you know, pike in a month, says, hey, you know what, vaccination mandate, et cetera, we're back in the same boat, and we're, I just don't think we should be going down the road of like, let's pick the place based on the, you know, what 40% here or 60% here might want or think. I think we need to pick the best venue for the event that we want to host, because the guidelines will likely change before the actual event happens, would be my guess. And so, because the fact of the matter is, like, both situations, there is a choice. Just, we're trying to pick and choose who gets to like their choice more. And that's, I don't know.
That's one part of the equation, but contractually, I don't know if we can tell Ball Arena a month beforehand or a week beforehand, we don't wanna tell them, they're in charge, we don't like your answers.
We're kind of in a, at this point, I would say we're up against it. We're gonna have to pick a site and roll with it, and roll with the punches, because we're not gonna be able to pick one and say, well, we think this is gonna be best, and then it become a state mandate, and we say, well, now that all things are equal, we wanna go back to Ball Arena. It's not gonna be available,
Right.
and we're not gonna get it, and we're gonna be stuck at a smaller venue. And here's the other piece, while we go through and we look at potential changes, the way that the tournament is run cannot be run anywhere else except for Ball Arena, as it's currently run. We cannot get 5 classifications on the floor in one space and have the 14,000 plus fans that we have that come to the Saturday evening event. We can't do that anywhere else. All of our other venues are roughly 7,000 people max. And so we would have to go to, which we could do. We can build a schedule however we want, but we lose that, we lose that special thing we have with our tournament of having all classifications in one building. Now, if it's just for 1 year, which is technically just for a second year, okay, but we just need to know that that's what we're facing when we look at potentially making any kind of moves.
Having personal experience with KSE, my fear is that we decide we go somewhere else other than Ball Arena, they're not gonna grant us that venue the following year. They made it very clear that they know that we have, that they have us over a barrel because it is the only facility in the state. And they can charge us what they want because they know we're gonna pay. Unless they change management.
No, that is, that's a pretty good description of their business practice, yeah.
So what's the drop dead decision date for Ball Arena?
What is today?
I would say before we first venue.
Yes, I've got a voicemail from them waiting for me to return their call, that came in yesterday. They're to that point.
So how much time are they giving you? Even though they're to the point, huh?
We're to the point, we need to make the call.
Yeah, we've held them off.
Because we've also gotta go, the other issue is we have to find another facility.
Right.
And so let's go ahead and let's speak to that. World Arena is not available. They have an event. Budweiser Event Center, our next largest venue, not available. They have an event. The Coliseum, potentially, they have something penciled in right now, but there may be some things we can do there. I've got the exact measurements, and I've got somebody actually with a CAD machine working on exactly how we can get our mats in there, because it's feasible. If we have it off by 2 degrees, we might be able to, it's potentially, but more than likely it's going down to 8 mats. And so we're talking lower number of mats, lower number of seating, meaning we're gonna have to change the structure of the tournament. So be it. And then once we go from there, I could get into the DU basketball arena. Nope, sorry, I can only do that Thursday, Friday. School of Mines, I can get in there Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Regis is open. The arena at CSUP is open, and I'll come back to Pueblo in a second. CSU would be open, CU would be open. Again, these are all we have to change the constructs of the tournament. Pueblo right now, actually, from what I'm being told, has a mandate that you must wrestle with a mask on while wrestling. So to leave Ball Arena, because we don't want to deal with the mandates, to go to another county that has a different mandate doesn't make any sense there. So I would personally say that anything Pueblo related is off the table. So your options are looking at some pretty small venues when we start talking about, and I'm not talking the DU hockey arena, it's the DU basketball arena, and it's only available Thursday, Friday. So now we're down to Mines and Regis.
Adam, would we have the same restrictions there as far as the vaccine or?
No, because remember that is not city or county mandated. It is just the arena itself that's mandating it
No,
right now.
I thought that the governor, oh no, that was standing only,
Right.
right?
Right.
Unseated.
Can't get COVID when you're sitting down. unless you're standing
So
up.
that's my point, because that's gonna be the thing that's gonna come down next.
Correct. I think it's gonna hit all of them. My personal opinion, my crystal ball that's very cloudy is that mandate that's at Ball Arena will be at all of our arenas before we get to wrestling season in February. But
I feel comfortable right now just saying, let's keep it as is, because we can't predict what it's gonna be wherever, or whatever, wherever we go, we don't know what it's gonna be like, and at least at the Ball Arena, we can keep this tournament intact at the way that we've normally seen it, and the way that, I'm assuming, based on what you and Travis have heard, our wrestling community has said loud and clear, we don't wanna have a repeat of what we had last year.
Based on the superintendents that I talked to, and there's only 170 of us, but they do not like that at all.
I would just want to say
Everyone.
this is basketball too, because we haven't signed any contracts, and right now we don't have any vaccine mandates. I'm sure we'll have mask mandates everywhere that we sign an agreement to, so.
So, Robert, what were you saying, that you guys don't want?
That they're against the Ball Arena. If there's restrictions, so we use the term least restrictive environment all the time in education, right? So in this case, it'd be least restrictions environment, right? And so, I mean, out of the superintendents that talk to me a lot, they are very adamant that any kind of vaccine, like Ball Arena, any kind of thing like that is totally off the table. It's like, can't even have it. Because you are limiting, and I know you would argue both sides of it, there's limitations or whatever, but the superintendent's I too would totally be against that.
But it's, the restriction right now, just to be clear from what Travis said on the choice piece of it, the restriction is a vaccine or a test within 72 hours, so there is an or. It's not just the vaccine.
correct. The
There
only
is an
person,
or that states you can get a test within 72 hours and go watch your grandkid play, or the kid can go get tested and go wrestle. The problem we look at with the Pandora's box of everything is that one kid goes and gets tested and he's positive, and then depending on the rule, more kids could be out.
the only person that cannot come into Ball Arena would be the person who is unvaccinated and sick. So that's how I've worked it through my head. Is the only person that can't come in, and I'm not taking a side either way politically. It's just that's the only person that can't come in is the unvaccinated sick person. Everyone else has the choice. They may not like having to make a choice, and I can totally get that. I'm just saying that when you boil it down to the simplest level, that's the only person that can't come in. Now we do have the issue with testing that would be involved and what that could do to your team. That could happen to my football teams that are in semifinals this week also. I mean, that could happen this afternoon. We've had, in football this year, we've had 2 teams off the bracket because of positive cases. So that's not just a wrestling and Ball Arena issue, because that's happening now in other sports. So,
The difference is but every kid there would be more testing that would occur.
Yep. Just like last year.
Adam, are you concerned about hitting your mark of spectators in the Ball Arena? And that impact, because a few games that I went to at Ball Arena, that's nowhere near capacity. They say it's the capacity, but when you get in there, it's far from that capacity.
So,
is that a concern of yours, hitting the spectator mark?
no, not with Ball Arena.
Concern that you can just
My concern is that on Saturday evening, we traditionally draw 12 to 14,000 people. I don't have another arena that can do that, which is fine. We could have 2 different finals on a Saturday. We've now lost the specialness of our tournament where we have all 5 classifications together. Again, if it's a 1 year, technically a 2-year thing because of our quickly put together tournament last year in Pueblo. If it's for year 2 and then we're looking at getting back to normal, that could be sold. To Ernie's point, there's no guarantee that the 3rd year we're going back to normal, that Pepsi Centers or Ball Arena says, hey, yeah, come on back. And that's what's interesting with the Ball Arena piece, and Ernie, you've seen this. The actual rental fee for a Ball Arena is not that much. It's everything else is where the fees come in like crazy. The actual rental fee, the actual amount of money that Ball Arena gets from us just for us to walk in the door of the facility is less than 10% of our overall bill. So they know that they can go and rent that facility to someone else for way higher than what they charge us for. Because our money goes to ushers and all the different things, security and bomb sniffing dogs and everything else we have to have there. That's where the bulk of our money goes. So it's, when you start talking about Kroenke Sports Group, yeah, I can't guarantee that they let us back in. I mean, we have it reserved. We don't have contracts, but they know our dates for the next 5 years. I've got that with them. I gave that to them 3 months ago, so that we're on reserve. I don't know what the conversation's like if I call and say, hey, go ahead and open that weekend back up now, because we still don't have a contract for this year. So let me put that out there too. There's nothing signed with Ball Arena for this wrestling season. Partially on our part, partially on theirs, because they don't know exactly what it's going to cost us, because there's one more increase in minimum wage coming up before we get there, and they wanted to know exactly how that was going to play out, so that we didn't sign something for a lower amount and then get charged more. So for me, that was a show of good faith on their part as well, that they didn't want to offer us something without being able to tell us exact pricing. But we don't have anything signed right now, so we're not breaking a contract, we're just breaking a relationship potentially, which I'm sure they faced with other folks that are coming to their venue too. There's gotta be other concerts and things that have elected not to be there because of that, would be my assumption. But there is that risk we run of that relationship being damaged. I don't know that it's irreparable harm, but there would be some potential there. So.
We don't know that they're not gonna charge us for all this, the testing now and all the extra entry and all of that, though, correct?
I don't believe they are, because that's their process, and that's technically outside the facility, so it's not inside the facility. So I'm assuming they're eating that cost, but I don't know. Yes, it would be in the contract, and we don't have one of those yet.
So here's my thought on this, is that we almost need to throw this out to the membership as, hey, state wrestling, here's where we're at. Option A is Ball Arena, here's what goes with it. It's vaccinations or tests, like always. Pros of that, all 10 mats, all classifications, regular, everything we've been doing. Option B would be Coliseum, maybe. 8 mats, I mean, just look it up, it's 8 mats, it's gonna require format changes, no guarantee that there won't be restrictions down the road. Part of the con there is no guarantee that Ball Arena lets us back in next year. Option C would be, whatever option C would be, a combination of, would you say Mines and Regis?
Be Mines, Regis, yeah, those types of.
Which would then require splitting the tournament into classifications. Again, no guarantee that Ball lets us back. Other venues that are not available, and just list those out. Say, I need your feedback, your choice by 10 o'clock tomorrow, kind of a thing.
With a disclaimer that you're not picking.
This isn't a vote, this is just your ability, your opportunity to give us your opinion and your thoughts.
The membership select.
Yeah, because you're not gonna report the vote, but that at least gives you an idea of some data of what is kind of out there, which will save, privately is gonna save me 18 phone calls and 47 emails about.
I was gonna say, yeah, that gives us information, but at the end of the day, I think it's this group that makes that decision, not me.
These people are hired for. That's their job. And so, I worry about opening up Pandora's box there, and now everybody feels like they need to have input every time a state site is determined. Which handcuffs the people that we have hired to do that job for us.
And I get what you're saying, and I agree to a large consensus. I don't know within the uniqueness of what we're talking about, that I do think that this is a membership-driven organization, and we're in a super unique time. And the impact that this has on those communities that Anthony and I deal with, and the feeling sometimes that decisions are made for them, and it's happening to them, and they don't have any kind of avenue to at least express their feelings. I think at least this gives them that avenue. The decision's gonna be what it is, and I think.
But I think we also gotta think about, if we're in a site right now, and this happens to us, what happens there? what happens to Bethany with basketball, I mean,
Yeah, that's where I think it has to be, it needs to be a philosophical
And it's
piece.
one of those that we're still.
Because we're talking a venue specific right now, but it's gonna be potentially a philosophical conversation that has to happen with cheer coming up in a month and with basketball.
And that's fine, and it's fine on the back end of that. I think as long as you can justify and say, hey, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's why this decision was made, and they can say, oh, of course,
And
that's
here's
why the
the-
decision was made.
And
In
here's the
lieu of
timeline.
that, in lieu of no information, they invent their own information. And that's where I feel like we're getting into some trouble sometimes with these, with especially at small rural schools. I think they are feeling disconnected from any decision-making process, and they just need to be communicated with to even a small degree. COVID has exacerbated that. This was not an issue 5 years ago at all, because I think people felt heard, they felt trusted. There's all this other stuff that's hanging over every decision that we make. And so people just need that extra little bit. They just do right now. And I know sometimes it feels like that we don't want to open Pandora's box, and we don't want to go down that road, and I get that. This is a different time.
So I guess to that, I would say that polling, that whatever phrase you want to use, should probably be board-led, going out and asking what the membership, because otherwise you're gonna turn around and have to do it again for Spirit, you're gonna turn around and do it again for basketball, and it's gonna be never, as opposed to what is our overall philosophy that we can make decisions off of based on knowing what the philosophy of the membership is. We want you to tell us your philosophy, and if you decide it's, as long as there's 51% on one side or the other, that's the philosophy we're going, whatever that is. But now we have a roadmap when these things come up. We know that the philosophy has been stated that we're doing this, and that's the direction we go. That way we're not doing this again in 30 days and in 60 days. And they had a voice. We've created our philosophy of how to get through the last remaining challenges of COVID. We have our philosophy of how to get through that. When we're on the other side, we just stuck with our philosophy because it came from the membership. And so that, to me, I think that solves our issue, because now we know where we're going. And there's gonna be people that, if it is 51-49, the 49 is gonna hate the decision. But we have our overall philosophy. This is what we're doing. This is how we're gonna make our decisions until we're able to get through our indoor sports and get back outside.
And that was how I started this conversation on philosophy, because we're trusted as a staff to make these decisions as long as it's not football, basketball, wrestling. It's like, you wanna do this for ice hockey, you wanna do this for cross country, you wanna do this, nobody questions that. They trust the leadership and the administration of the people in our office. When we get to football, basketball, wrestling, then it's like you're doing something to us. So we don't change the way that we do business in here. And that's why we thought we need to bring this to our board, because we know we're gonna advocate for the best decision, for the best way that their sports can be visible for the athletes as well as the spectators. But we get questioned on certain sports, and so we want your leadership and guidance around what those decisions, so that if we do make those decisions, we have your support. And that's where we don't wanna be as an island, as CHSAA staff did this outside of our board.
Because I would even go with, you brought up hockey. It's a different sport, but it's the same venue.
Yeah, and
And so if we're making a sport-directed decision, it's really about a venue. So that's where I think it needs to become, what's our philosophy? Because Ball Arena impacts two of our sports. One is a large metro sport, I give you that, but it does impact two of our sports. And so to go and say it's not okay for this sport, but okay for this sport, I don't know that that's where any of us wanna be either. That's where I think getting just getting a sense of what our overall philosophy is as an association to be able to make these decisions, that's what I think is gonna serve us well.
I'm just telling you from what I hear from people and from what Robert said, if you don't ask, we're gonna have all kinds of blowback, regardless of what the decision is.
So put it that way though,
Yeah,
so.
general.
No, I think we asked.
Is it okay to change wrestling but not hockey? I mean, like, I think people need to see, and I get it, I get it, but they need to see, everybody needs to see the bigger picture of, it isn't just about wrestling, it is hockey too, and if it's basketball, I mean, it has to be about everything and
Yes.
everyone, not just this or just that, because that's what affects me.
So could it be something like this? I'm trying to figure out like how many philosophies there are, which that could take forever, but, I mean, it could be as simple as, it doesn't matter about the sport, you know, do you pick the best facility regardless of restrictions? Could you pick smaller venues where you break it up, but have maybe mask only? Or do you even have to go smaller and go maybe smaller, more intimate facilities where there's the least restrictive environment? Maybe that's the three philosophies and that's the question.
Yeah, and with that, and so I think in those, like, we're asking the membership to make their preference, but they're making it on like moving variables too, because like restrictions can and will probably change, right? And so like, which is where I would fall in, like pick the best facility, because we don't know what's gonna happen in the next month. What are the dates for wrestling? When does it happen?
February 17, 18, 19.
Yeah, I mean, like that's a long time from now. It can get a lot worse. It can actually get a lot better. Like who knows? I mean, there's a new pill apparently. So I think it even helps with sitting COVID. But I don't know, like, I mean, to the point, like I get where we wanna survey the membership, but like we also hire people to make these judgment calls. And I mean, that's the point of this. And like, I don't know, like, and I think we've learned over the last year and a half that it doesn't matter the decision, we're gonna blow back. No matter what
So
happens.
does asking for having the data and asking that question, does that hurt anything though?
I think it can hurt in the sense of, like, people are gonna see that, and if people see that we pick even the majority, they're like, well, then why even ask? Like, I mean, because we hear that feedback all the time. Like, why even ask if you're not even gonna take the feedback of the membership? And I think that's a very realistic possibility of what can be the outcome here, and I think that's just as damaging, in my opinion, based on the feedback that I've heard over the last 6 to 9 months.
Well, I don't know that you would publish the results necessarily, that's data. It's just data, yeah.
Well, I don't know, I mean, I still sit on the side, like, it's just data to appease people, because we know that at the end of the day, we're gonna make the best decision we need to do. If we're just getting the data just to appease, like, people see through that, in my opinion, like, I do. I know when my boss is asking me questions just because he knows he has to. So I just, and at that point, like, save the email. That's me. I don't know. I get it. I know there's gonna be blowback one direction or the other, but I think like equitably, are we gonna do this for every single sport for the entire year? Is it gonna extend into next year when things go back to normal? Is everybody like, you know what? I don't actually like the drive to Denver. It's the Pandora's box, and it's not just around COVID.
I would agree, I love what you're saying, Caleb. I could agree with Alfie if it was a general survey to say, what is your opinion around this? And it's not sport specific, and and this goes along with what Adam says, we understand what the philosophy of our membership is, and it allows us probably to make a decision and say, okay, this is what we got from you, but going in and saying, wrestling is this, but we don't care about ice hockey over here or this over here. I just don't wanna go down that path where you're picking and choosing sport-specific opportunities or venues, but maybe a general helps to offset them feeling like they had a voice with that disclaimer that we're just trying to get some feedback on your philosophy as we see that the pandemic is not waning and potentially we need to make these decisions sooner rather than later. We could get that out, have it back before we went to break, and then allow Adam to move forward with whatever he needs to, Justin to move forward with whatever he needs to, and then all of the indoor sports in the winter. I don't know if that's potentially.
The only thing that I would remind us all about, and most of us were there, Alfie was there in a different capacity at the time, but we made a commitment to the superintendents and the rural schools that we would communicate with them. Maybe not necessarily give them grace for everything we were doing, but we said we would communicate with them. And I think this is a big enough picture that we've gotta have some form of communication with them.
I agree, and I was agreeing, but I also think Jim's superintendent or principal, or, you know, this isn't just about the rural schools, this is about, like you said earlier, this impacts statewide, wrestling does. But then it really should be where we get the feedback on what they would like us to do in terms of adjusting around the pandemic that's still impacting how we're doing business.
And I would like to say, at least communicate out that it will be a tool in making those decisions.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that, because you may get handcuffed where there is no venues available and this is the only choice.
Well, that's where I think your question almost needs to be as simplistic as, are you in favor of keeping our tournaments in status quo venues regardless of local restrictions? Or are you in favor of finding the least restricted venue if it means different venue and or different format? So it's as simple, because that's what we're down to, is do you believe in having it status quo regardless of what it takes? Or we don't wanna go through any of those hoops and we want here? Because that's really our divide. And once we know once we know where we lie on the divide, we can make those decisions.
180 say this, 180.
Is that really a survey that needs to go out, or is that, I mean, typically that decision has been made in sport committees,
No.
format of state tournaments.
Yes, but in this case, there's only one venue that can hold our format. So that's where this one's unique.
We're like rushing into a decision that
We-
is like, years in the making. And doing this or that, right? Are we gonna do this or that, which is gonna have consequences in years to come. Right? Instead of
But
rushing into this decision.
To secure a venue, we have to do a here and now, otherwise
Exactly.
we're not gonna have a
Decisions for
decision to
what's gonna
make.
happen in the next 5 years. Now, when we already have a venue, so to say, and not everybody may not like the conditions that are placed on them, but we have a venue.
Yep.
And so, in my opinion, we gotta stick to what you guys have done. We have a venue, we go with it, and let's work all this other stuff in the next, number of months, next number of years, right? Go through sport committees to find out what does wrestling want, what does football want, because we're hearing rumblings with Alfie's report, right? Why should we go for football for the next 3 years or whatever? The state's divided in so many different areas, right? But we can do that over time. We don't need to force a decision on a lot of that stuff right now. We do need to make a decision about wrestling. We do need to make a decision about this year. But the philosophies, however many there are with wrestling, maybe the 1As and 2As can care less about being at ball arena for wrestling. I don't know. Maybe every championship 1A and 2A wants to hold at Lyman High School now, just because that's the central location and they're not gonna have mandates, right? There's so many different
Last
processes.
meeting, that didn't happen. Gary said no. But can I say this, John? You guys weren't the target of the rural schools not saying that they're not listening. That the association, they didn't say John, they said the commissioner doesn't listen, said the CHSAA staff doesn't listen. And we spent thousands of dollars to bring all those groups together to really have a think tank around what we can do to de-escalate that perception. And I think that there's been some really good communication around, and I would like to say that I would like to put together a survey that's general enough around some of the health mandates and some of the things that are happening right now. I think Adam brought 2 simplified questions. And what would it hurt to just send something out and say, hey, we need your responses back by December 4th or 5th. We're not giving away any legislative power to select sites. We're just reaching out and saying, hey, we have a challenge going on here. We have agreed to communicate, not just to rural schools, but even to our membership more. We're getting thumbs up on what we've done. I just don't see this as a bad thing. I don't think it's gonna take away any decision-making based on how we kind of structured this 2 or 3 question survey. And we can get it out next week on or tomorrow on Survey Monkey. Has nothing, I just think this is aligned with what we kind of talked about through the rural think tank and what we kind of talked about as a committee about communication. It's not a big deal.
I'm in agreement with that, and I think if you address it in the disclaimer, that these are unusual times, and we would like your feedback, versus this is gonna be an ongoing thing, and we're gonna have to do it every year, or every sport. I think if you include that in your disclaimer, I think that it would go a long way, especially for the rural superintendents that say, hey, for the sake of transparency, they do want our opinion.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. I like what the general way that Adam stated the questions. I think we can get that out tomorrow. It's still gonna come back to you, right? Because you are the ones who approve the sites. We just wanna make sure that if we were to make the decision as we've been hired to do, and then we're bring that we had your support, that we weren't sitting out there, Adam wasn't sitting out there, and then all of a sudden, one of you come and do your board report and say, Adam didn't ask us anything about X, Y, Z, and we're just feeling like we have to defend that. So I feel like collaboratively, if we're all together, whether we get eaten alive or not, we are all on the same page and can support each other. So if you guys are good, we'll get a survey monkey constructed today, get it out to the membership. With maybe the first week in December. I don't know, Adam, is that right?
Do you have a drop dead?
Do you have that long?
No, I mean, we're at it, like, we need to.
So they have to make a decision today, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that, we can get a survey out, but we can't be pushing to December, like, this needs to be
Well, we'll be gone for Thanksgiving and some of our schools will be out next week.
we get it out today, it can be, they can have the rest of the week to respond, and we'll get the, that on, we can
I'm good with
pull it
that.
out on Monday.
I think you're just gonna find a lot of
You don't have to-
dissension, like, not dissension, but just not everybody's on the same boat, even at like a school. Like, if I were to pull my coach to get a response, like, I would you like me, like.
Oh, I was getting ready to say that too.
That's what I'm like.
It almost needs to go to ADs, SUPs, and coaches, because it's gonna be three different
You make a choice.
answers.
After them are very, you can tell on the other side.
Really, truly, it's about who we normally communicate with in this instance, right? And because we've said that, we will send a survey out to athletic directors, and then because we've expanded that in the last 2 or 3 years, we will include principals and superintendents. They can walk down the hallway by Friday and ask their wrestling coaches, or their ice hockey coaches, or any of their other coaches what their opinion, and that voice will come from that AD, principal, or superintendent. And I think we're not trying to embrace everybody in this, but just to meet what we've agreed to do. And I'm good with Adam's timeline. You heard the parents say today, wow, I got admonished for getting an appeal done so quickly, right, and getting it set up. So know that someone's gonna say, you only gave us 3 days to answer this, or 2 days, but that's what the board is saying. We gotta have a decision to some of these the administrators, and we're gonna get that out this afternoon or tomorrow morning, and you have until Friday. Is that what everybody's saying? Anybody opposed to that timeline and those general questions around selection of sites? With a small disclaimer that this is just unusual times, and we would like to get your opinion as we move forward with that decision and approval as the board of directors, period.
And just gathering data to help guide the decision-making process,
Yeah.
which is truly what it is.
Yeah.
It aligns with what we said we'd do, so,
Yeah.
I think it works,
And
Yeah.
it really will provide some good insight, because you may get 14
Okay, is
responses.
everybody good?
Ron, sorry.
Because then that's what they're probably doing.
In that, are you going to ask what class? Because I think there will be a discrepancy, I think, and it'll help us give good data. 5A thinks one thing and 1A thinks something else. I think it'll just be.
but I think that's also where our divide is right now, I mean, that's where our divide is right now, I don't.
But in my case, that would give me really good defense to be able to talk to my superintendents and be able to be like, look, you know, we as 178 will never agree. And so, but here's where the divide is, and we can talk about it among ourselves and try to solve it inside our own little system instead of bashing checks all the time. So I think we can help ourselves if I have that, because that's all.
And really, truly, it's just whether or not you want, I mean, we could make it general, but the real question is, wrestling at Ball Arena will require you to be vaccinated or tested in the next 72 hours.
Okay,
Do you wanna go there, or do you wanna go somewhere else? We can sugarcoat it and say all that stuff, but we really wanna make sure that our wrestling community wants to go in Ball Arena with the
I agree, that's the
restrictions.
question at hand today, but it's gonna be a question for basketball, and it's gonna be a question for Spirit.
No, because basketball's probably going in the Coliseum, it's not going in Ball
What,
Arena.
but what,
I thought the
but the
survey was.
Coliseum may have the exact same mandate by the time we get
Yeah,
there.
it's not about
That's-
wrestling, it's about the philosophy.
Right, we've got to decide, because we're gonna have these same conversations for every indoor sport, unless we get an idea what our philosophy is. Once we know what our association's philosophy is, we don't have to have this same conversation for
I think
every indoor
Frammel's
sport.
philosophies were the right ones, and I think that's the question that we need to mention.
Okay,
Both in different spots.
we're holding something down.
They're all different. Wrestling's way different than basketball, that community is
That's my
way different.
point, they'll cry about certain So let's just go, I like what someone said about classification, we'll add that in. I don't know how the data gets aggregated so that you can see how many 1A schools said yes, let's go this way, this is our philosophy, best venue. And then 2As all said, no, we don't want the best venue, we want the least amount of restrictions and health mandates because our community has 0. So we will put in a classification piece to it. We'll ask 2 or 3 general questions about what we would like to do, and then the disclaimer basically says this is just a tool to assist the board of directors and CHSAA staff as we move into winter venues that may have that. Is everybody good with that?
Well, I would suggest that you make it basketball classification or whatever classification so that people could 3 or 4 different classifications.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Just pick your best. I'm gonna say pick your, yeah,
Basketball.
pick your basketball.
Basketball.
We have to separate the classifications to different sites.
If we don't go to ball? No, we could go to one side still, we would have to do, our sessions could remain the same, we would just have to split up our championships into 2 championship sessions.
Okay.
Instead of singles, because that's where we would
Okay.
have larger capacity than we could anywhere else.
And will you have an identified by school?
I don't know, let's try to go through a couple more things.
Sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering that if we've got to go back to our districts and have some discussions, I can say,
Or is that already?
this school, you know,
Okay.
I,
Can we move forward only because I'm just saying that we have a lot of agenda left and I think we are all on the same. Is there anybody opposed to a survey with classification, 2 or 3 questions on that, get it out? You guys have to have it back to us on Friday. We get the data to all the assistant commissioners and then they move forward with how they need to make their decisions and no different than normal, we bring it to you for your side approval. Okay?
If you have additional questions or points of emphasis, maybe talk to them.
We're getting it out quick. From what I hear, we're getting out this afternoon, so if you have anything, please let us know before you leave today. Button's gonna get pushed and you're gonna get a survey probably by this afternoon. Okay.
did you get enough information from us to be able to move forward with some of these things?
I think so. Adam,
What?
did you feel like he just said, did we get enough information in this discussion to be able to create that?
Yeah, I guess my, and this is more when the data comes in, so I'm posing a what if, and I don't really mean to do that, but for the current arena to work, we need all classifications there. If we come in and we have a majority of our lower classifications do not want to have a venue that imposes information on them. If we pull them out, we've now had to pull out the larger classifications also because it can't be run with just them there. And so that's my concern with the classification piece instead of just looking at overall numbers. Because if I had 2 classifications and say absolutely not, and we need to pull them out, that's now impacted the entire state because the 2A schools have said there's no way in hell we're gonna go put a mask on and get tested or whatever it is. So
Getting that for information, was there ever any conversation other than what Don said where we're thinking about splitting up the wrestling tournament or any of those events?
But that's kind of my point though, is that like we're asking for this feedback, and if we anticipate that we're gonna get a majority of small schools that are gonna be upset if we go to the ball arena, even after we ask or don't ask, and that's the thought, well, why didn't we split? Like people are thinking about that survey straight up about COVID and COVID restrictions. They're not thinking about tickets, they're not thinking about the fact that it doesn't work at various sites. That's my point, is that it's pandering to pander. The real decisions are made over the last year, 2 years, 3 years, because like this is the event that has been in motion for a long time. That's kind of my point. And so if we make this about wrestling, then we're not actually doing anybody a service. If we want to communicate, then let's communicate. But that's different than asking for everybody's input every single time, because they're not in the office making the decisions. As much as some people like to think that they are, they're not, right? That is my point, is that it is lip service, and that's my reservation, is I'm just not into it. Because at the end of the day, the decision is still getting made. And I'm telling you, like, I know we're not publishing that data, but data always gets out one way or another. It will blow up in our faces if we're seeing a massive amount opposed in one classification and a massive amount for it in a different classification, and we choose one classification.
And I think that's gonna happen in the data.
It will happen in the data. which is why that's why it's the Pandora's box, because we're now gonna have to go down this road with every single sport. The data, because goodness, we know that data can be used however you want to use data. And so like, I think we actually have the data we need to make the decision. It feels to me like we are just trying to ask for more data just to appease people, and that I realize like I'm tired and in the last year of my term, so maybe I'm thinking differently about it, but like, that's where I'm at. We're gonna get blowback one way or another, and so, I don't
But
know.
I think if 100% of schools don't answer, you wouldn't make a change based on that those responses, right? I mean, you can say that, yeah, overwhelmingly 1A, 2A, 5A, whatever says this, so we're gonna do this, we're gonna make this decision, not based on the feedback, but because this is what's in the best interest. I don't know,
And I'm with you, and listen, and I wanna be clear, like, I've been at those small schools.
If you don't have everybody say something back, how do you say we're gonna go with that, just because 50% of one classification did answer it?
So, the reason we're asking for the data is because we said we would ask people. That was our commitment to the small rural schools, that was the commitment to everybody's too. We were going to communicate and make sure that we reached out and that people had a voice. This association that's driven by the membership.
Okay.
And people were feeling disillusioned by that. That's all this is. We're not saying Adam has to make a decision based on this data. It's a way to give them a voice and a way to give them some input into possibly a decision, but we're not hamstringing him or anything else. At the end of the day, he's still got to do what's in the best interest of the association. The only thing that this does give him then, and us, is the ability to say, we heard you. We understand that you had concerns, or maybe you didn't want to go there. Here's why, though, we had to do this. But we got it. Or maybe there's, within that data, that it comes out and it says, hey, look, it makes perfect sense, we're going to go to the same place, there's consensus, we heard from everybody, great, we're all on the same path. I just don't, again, I agree, I don't see the harm in it.
To clarify though, we said we would communicate. We did not say we would ask about every decision. And this is an emergency type situation. And so like, I hear you, and I agree. I am in support of more communication, but like what you just said is exactly what we're going to do anyway. We're going to make a decision, and we're going to defend why we made the decision. And the data that we're requesting, it's gonna be there, but that is not gonna be the driver for the decision. And so like, I don't know, and if the board is in favor of it, then sure, I'll hop on a train, but like, that's my point, is that I just feel like it's a lip service, and that's my take on it. And so, because we are still communicating.
So, here we are. I mean, if we're gonna move forward with the survey, we need to get it out, we need to come to a consensus. So we probably just need to take a vote, I guess, and make sure that if we're gonna do that, but we're not gonna send the survey out. I think the best, take a vote, we'll make a decision, we'll move on. So, let's, do you wanna do just, all those in favor of sending out this survey as we kind of described earlier?
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Do you want it to be a generic philosophy survey or a wrestling specific survey?
Generic.
Okay.
So all those in favor, thumbs up for sending out the survey? Get a count. 11? That's what I said. All right, all those opposed? Two. All right, so we'll send out the survey. And then we'll go from there. We'll see what happens. And I think all those things, the points that we brought up are important within that. So the points that this is unique and everything else. So just making sure that survey reflects some of those things. All right, easy peasy. Next.
What number are we on?
Okay, so,
Just a walk in the park.
Okay, imagine that COVID's complicated and it's hard to make a decision.
Who knew? But at least we're all seated. Yeah.
okay, so what we're gonna do is, Luke just said this was fine, we're gonna do Alex's legal report, and I'll do a quick, budget report. And then we'll just be in the checkpoint things of the agenda that you really don't have to vote on, and then we can just have a working lunch if you wanna do that. So to get the ones taken care of that we need to vote on, is that all right?
So,
I already did text messages, people are starving, so we thought, let's try to get these two things out of the way.
I just wanna say, like, the food is cooking, so I think
We're gonna go like 10 minutes max.
Okay, and then you said working lunch, also told the assistants to come in, so I just wanna make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of what we did the last meeting, they could take their plates and go out there if they wanted, then, but we'd love to have them here, but it took longer on the appeal. And nobody can wait until after the meeting to eat, because we have a bunch of reports that need to happen. So it happened last month too.
All right, Alex? So, let's see, we have a pending, we just responded to an inquiry from the Department of Justice people from that claim of the kid who was not disqualified, but who was told that he was not able to compete in the four-man relay in swimming last spring because he had a patch on that was holding his.
Insulin pump, is that what it was?
A medical device. Diabetes stuff. And he did not have a note from a recognized physician that said that was okay for him to do that. So the rule itself is a national federation rule, it is not a CHSAA. The person who made the call was the head referee, who, as you know, is not a CHSAA employee, but he was acting as an independent contractor at the time. Of course, everything got all befuddled in the head of a lawyer and got sent in as a CHSAA rule was enforced by CHSAA, and it was discriminatory against the kid because of his disability.
What's it mean?
So they asked us for information. I provided them with a general statement that said, this is a national federation rule, it's not our rule. It does have, it's a rule of general application, which is to say it does not just apply to kids with disabilities. It applies to all kids with TANE. The reason for the rule, they were arguing was, well, this will affect competition or something. The reason for the rule is that our referees are not medical technicians. So they don't know if that device is safe for the kid to be getting wet or not. That's why they asked for a letter from the doctor. All he needed was a letter from a doctor. And he couldn't provide it. And then the referee advised coach that, we had that problem, and the coach said, it's okay, I've got backup, and raced somebody else. Then it got tied into, well, and this is another thing where it got scrambled in somebody's mind, that then the whole team was disqualified from the relay. As it turns out, they competed in the relay, and they were disqualified because there was an early start. And it had nothing to do with any of the others. So we've responded that typical next step is DOJ investigates, and they have 6 months to complete that investigation. If they don't complete it during that time, then they haven't completed it, it's over. And they haven't been meeting that 6-month deadline for years. Anyway, that's pending. The way that the claim is phrased, there is not an economic component because there was no economic loss. What they want is for the rule to be revised, which of course we can't do, because it ain't our rule. But they going to be revised so that there can be an exception made for kids with handicaps who need to have these devices, and that exception exists. All you have to do is have the physician that says that you need it. So that is what's going on the legal front.
So Alex, you're saying that that's pending, that's not pending, that, so, looming, that I don't
It's
understand.
pending. They submitted their claim. Yeah, last time we had a meeting, we didn't know if it was pending or not. And now we know that it's pending.
So my question would be, do we, are we open to any sort of legal danger, if you will? I know you said that our head referee is not a CHSAA employee, but in essence, they are a contracted employee and acting on our behalf.
Yeah, theoretically, it could be argued he's a contracted employee, he's acting on our behalf. Actually, that's a bit of a stretch, but he's enforcing he's enforcing the National Federation's rule, and there's no doubt, I mean, the rule is not hard to read. Okay, also, given the fact that we're getting close to lunch, I did look up, you were asking about that Supreme Court decision with the NCAA, and I can do a written report on that, but basically, that was it. Interestingly, it was an antitrust case brought by the students, brought by Division I athletes, saying that the NCAA has a monopoly on college, intercollegiate sports, and therefore its restriction on the amount of money that they can be given as educational consideration violates the antitrust laws. Among other things, well, there was a unanimous court decision that said, yes, the NCAA is subject to antitrust, and yes, that did, in a very limited context, violate that. I think the likelihood of that being applied to, I tried to think, okay, how could you say that applies to the pending question, which was whether or not those high school students could get their sign contracts or whatever with some company that's going to handle their social media. Is the two are worlds apart. The two situations. And in large part, the complicated argument about whether or not the antitrust law would apply to us as to students is, that would be a huge stumbling block. There is actually an exemption for governmental entities from the antitrust law. That's all if you want to hear about antitrust.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyone else? All right, next item.
Well, it's budget.
Budget.
Well, I think after the hearing and audit today, there's a lot, to go through with the budget in terms of, just I'll point out some specific items on the budget, but as I've said every month for the last 13 months, 14 months, is we'll just continue to monitor and match real-time resources, revenue streams, while monitoring our operating expenses, looking at our cash flows, and really comparing what we're doing to our budget projections to see if we're even in the ballpark of what we thought would happen as we started to have less restrictions, and now we're hearing that potentially it will go back, and I think that's in line with what our auditor said in the management letter, is we don't know everything. And so all I can tell you is that we just continue to monitor, we continue to compare where we think we are. I mean, just, we're looking at some expenses, and we said, gosh, we gotta go all the way back to 2018 to see if these are comparable, because for the last 2 years, it's just, there's no real, barometer of where we should be at this time of the year. And then you look at field hockey and you get your field hockey revenue in, and you go, wait a minute, 0 this time last year, because field hockey was played in season C. So you really cannot compare a lot of your checkpoints along the way in the budget. So we just continue to monitor those things. But a couple of things I want to point out to you, we're about 90%. Charlie's done a great job of really following up on the membership fees and dues. And to be only in the beginning of November and be about 90% of our membership fees and participation fees speaks volumes to having that operating budget kind of where we need it to be to do some of the additional things, potentially maybe now some additional things to be in the ball arena or wherever we go, but there have been some expenses outside our norm with handling portions of the pandemic. So Charlie is going to, we had a conversation around this, he's gonna invoice all of our schools, because although we have 90% of our membership fees and participation, they have kind of made a selection that they weren't gonna pay for the platform until later on in the school year, but yet everybody's utilizing the platform. So it's not like you can check a box and say, oh, I'll do Cato or I'll do this. No, the platform is part of how we need to be able to pay for development and all of those things. So Charlie's gonna make a second effort to at least get our platform fees paid for through the invoicing of our membership. Just try to look through anything else that there was some conversation around streaming, probably network, and we are working with the NFHS to find a way that we can offset some of our school expenses if we agree to share content, and that content is live first for the NFHS along with CHSAA. They are willing to look at lowering some of those costs, maybe even down to no cost if you share the content. And that's for the contracted state championship events. I had an athletic director kind of question, well, you know, you're hosting a CHSAA event. That is CHSAA's content, that is CHSAA. There's, Alex will tell you, there's court cases across the nation regarding, even though you're hosting that event, it's still part of the championship playoff series that is under the CHSAA umbrella. And so we understand that if you're a school, and not every, some people would wish they had the problem of having a volleyball team in, a soccer team in, a basketball team, and what it's costing them to stream, right? I said, I bet you there'd be schools that want to be in your shoes, to even have kids in the playoff to be able to stream those games. But we are working closely with the NFHS, and I think we're just on the verge of getting some confirmation that we can negotiate content share versus a check to the association. So know that we're hearing the membership on that. Just trying to think of, I know that there was a little bit of pushback around GoFan and really moving more and more towards hard tickets, but we are able to reconcile championship, the end goal at the end of how many tickets were sold, coming together with some finances, because we are using an electronic ticket system, and it's a push of a button that says, these are the amount of tickets you sold, these are the amount of children, kid tickets you sold, senior citizen tickets, and we already have the financials ready to go from volleyball. We're just waiting for some of the expenses to come in, but that used to be a 2 or 3 week process to figure out how many cash tickets, how many electronic tickets. I think Adam will tell you, he was able to call Charlie, he knew what was going on with softball within 24 to 48 hours after the conclusion of that event. So that's something that we're gonna try to utilize more and more. Also, we heard, I don't know who told me this, one of my staff members today, that moving forward, there are gonna be venues that will not even sell a ticket for any kind of cash exchange. So we are at the forefront, we're taking the heat up front by pushing our membership to use the electronic process. forced to do that anyway with the ball arena and other arenas that are not gonna be doing cash sales moving forward. And will impact our people if we stay in an archaic way of doing business. Real quick on anything on the, I think what we can anticipate is that venue costs are gonna go up. I mean, there's just, it's no different than groceries, there's no different than gas. For us to go in and try to negotiate a pre-pandemic overhead cost with security, I already got a call from our security liaison that we're probably gonna be about $75 an hour for police and security. And so just know that we are going to have to increase some of our, or they're gonna have to increase some of their financials for us to even be in the building. And so we're probably not gonna come back to you to ask you to reduce any of those ticket prices that you approved last winter and spring until we see what the overhead cost will be for some of these venues. And I keep telling you, we don't wanna do it off the backs of your patrons, off your students and not our schools, but it is where we're at, and we're just a small part of everything else that has increased in price. I mean, Jen is good in negotiating a lot of things, but I don't know that that will help us as we move forward. All right, anything on the budget? I know that was pretty quick, but I think after hearing where we are in the audit, and I tried to look around the room and gauge, but that was a dang good audit for where we were a year ago, and then knowing that we had to pay a settlement, right? And we shut down at 2019 March. We've been in recovery mode, and for someone to say you almost had a zero balanced budget, if it wasn't for things that were out of our control, that's cause for, I'm sorry, I'm gonna slap you all on the back, and I have to slap my staff on the back, because that is something we could control, is how we're gonna get through some of that. And to hear our auditor say that, I'm like, wow. Even our best case scenario wasn't at zero. So I will end with that, and I'll need a motion to approve the budget. You will get another budget report at our virtual meeting on December 15th. I think, Charlie, would you like to add anything?
No, I think you covered it all. If you have any questions, feel free to call me directly.
Motion? To approve the budget report.
One second.
Second, Robert. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, with that, that's approved.
So if you want, it does smell like the food's cooking. So if we, and I'm gonna actually ask our assistants to come in and we will do a working lunch, but they've all agreed they'd love to come in and have lunch, and there's nothing else really that we need to vote on, so we're gonna do reports if you guys are okay with that. Oh, go ahead.
No, so no chairs in here, they're gonna stay on the outside?
No, they can come in here.
All right,
So, Board of Director, and two things, thank you, Brett, for the brisket, and he also did a pork belly, which I had the taste for him, and it's perfect. And then also to Jen and to Kathy for the decorations, and who knew that the snacks would come in handy when we eat lunch at 1:30, but thank you, Jen, and thank you, Kathy.
Yeah.
grab lunch, come back.
You go regardless? Yes, sir.
Question.
Yes.
So since the ball arena is there a possibility for any
I asked them, like, the supply person that comes in, they said, yes, the only exception would be your wrestlers who take out their masks and they step onto the mat. They look very, their theory, if their large venue becomes, A, soon or B, if there's an outbreak that's associated with their venue, they'll get looked at by CDPHE and all those, and have to go down to 50% capacity.